Trump never expected this. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Tianjin has turned into a turning point on the global stage, and it has left him unsettled. What looked like another formal gathering became the most significant SCO meeting so far, uniting India, China, and Russia in a way the West did not anticipate. Picture this: nearly 40% of the world's population and close to a quarter of the global economy represented in one hall, making it clear that Washington no longer dictates the rules. For US policymakers, this feels like their worst-case scenario unfolding.
And as these country leaders try to set up perhaps what many see as an alternative to a Western-led or a United States-led global diplomatic system.
At the center of attention stood Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping, who surprised many by pressing the reset button on their troubled relationship. Just a few years ago, their armies clashed violently in the Galwan Valley. Yet now, Modi spoke of trust and mutual respect, while Xi described the future as the dragon and elephant dancing together. They even agreed to reopen direct flights and continue dialogue at the upcoming BRICS summit. On the surface, it looked cordial, but the symbolism went far deeper. Two countries long divided by border disputes and rivalries suddenly found common ground. And with Vladimir Putin present, the message of a shifting balance of power was unmistakable. Putin himself hinted that Trump would fume over what BRICS was becoming, a bloc finally moving with one voice. Meanwhile, Trump keeps wielding tariffs like a hammer, while the SCO is shaping itself into a shield of resistance. India presents itself as a mediator, China flexes its military and economic weight, and Russia survives by aligning with both. For Trump, who once claimed he alone could resolve disputes like India and Pakistan, this is a blow to his image and influence. The global landscape is changing quickly, and America's hold is loosening. The pressing question now is whether this summit marked the birth of a new global order, and if Trump has any real tools left to push back. And perhaps the most unexpected moment? When Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky looked not to Washington but to Modi, to take on the role of peacemaker between Kyiv and Moscow.
President Zelensky, instead of reaching out again to America, is reaching out to Indian Prime Minister.
The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, once seen as a modest regional bloc, is rapidly turning into a geopolitical force with the weight to reshape the global order. When it was founded in 2001, the SCO's main purpose was to handle security concerns in Central Asia. Today, it has evolved into a vast alliance that includes nearly 40% of the world's population and more than 30% of global GDP. With China and India as its twin pillars, supported by Russia, Central Asia, and now even Iran, the SCO is transforming into a genuine counterbalance to Western influence. What the West initially dismissed as just another diplomatic forum is now revealing itself as an economic and strategic tool. Russia and China, in particular, are determined to use it to push back against rules long written in Washington's favor. The scale of its combined economic power is hard to ignore. For years, the United States quietly benefited from the tensions between China and India. As long as those two giants distrusted each other, Washington felt secure. If Beijing grew too dominant, Delhi could be relied upon to resist. That division was America's safety valve, its way of keeping Asia from uniting. This strategy even reached into global supply chains. Take Apple, for example. When tariffs and political risks made production in China less reliable, the company expanded heavily into India. That move gave Washington comfort. If factories in China faced disruption, Indian plants could step in to keep American consumers supplied. It seemed like a clever design. Play one power against the other, and always have a backup. But that safety net is fraying. The SCO and BRICS are pulling India and China into the same orbit, however cautiously. If they begin to complement rather than compete with one another, Washington loses its fallback option. Imagine factories in Shenzhen and Chennai no longer divided, but working within the same trade networks that no longer defer to American oversight. This is where the balance of power starts to tilt. The United States has long depended on China's vast manufacturing system and India's vast workforce. But if these nations decide to prioritize cooperation with each other instead of reliance on America, the shift would be immediate. It would mean Washington can no longer divide Asia, no longer dictate production lines, and no longer prevent two of the world's largest economies from rewriting global rules on their own terms. And this is not some distant scenario. The process is unfolding in real time. The SCO is not acting in isolation. It overlaps with BRICS, another alliance focused on rewriting financial and trade norms. The overlap gives both groupings sharper influence. China and India sit at the core of each, and even limited coordination between them creates an economic center of gravity that pulls in smaller states across Eurasia and beyond. For Washington, this is more than a challenge. It's the prospect of seeing two of the fastest-growing economies in the world, backed by Russian energy and Central Asia's resources, redirecting trade away from Western-controlled systems. That possibility alone signals how fragile America's grip on the global economy has become. And the impact isn't limited to trade. The shift is now spilling into diplomacy itself. It is no small development that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has turned to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to mediate peace between Ukraine and Russia. This is more than a diplomatic detail. It reflects how the balance of global influence is moving eastward. Only 2 weeks earlier, Donald Trump had met face-to-face with Vladimir Putin in Alaska. That encounter was expected to be a breakthrough, a dramatic attempt to end the war. Yet it produced nothing. No deal, no truce, not even a roadmap. And now, instead of turning to Washington or Brussels, the world's attention shifts to New Delhi. For Trump, this is humiliating. He has built his image on being the ultimate dealmaker, the man who could sit across from adversaries and force a resolution. But Zelensky's choice of Modi makes it clear: the world doubts America's ability to bring peace. For Trump personally, the stakes are higher than Ukraine itself. His reputation as the leader who could deliver results is now on the line, and he is unlikely to accept that quietly. Why Modi then? Why India? The answer lies in India's rare position on the world stage. It maintains deep economic ties with Russia, particularly through massive oil purchases that keep Moscow's finances alive despite Western sanctions. At the same time, India is courted by Washington and Europe as a counterweight to China's rise. This delicate balancing act has given New Delhi credibility on both sides of the divide. Unlike the United States or NATO, India is not seen as pushing a rigid agenda. It can speak to Moscow without alienating Kyiv, and it can engage with the West without being dismissed as a proxy. For Ukraine, this balance is invaluable. Zelensky appears to believe Modi could serve as an honest broker, someone who Putin might trust enough to listen to, while still respecting Kyiv's core interests. Few leaders in the world can claim such a position. That the Ukrainian president would reach across continents to India in the middle of Europe's bloodiest war in generations underscores how much has changed in global diplomacy. The broader implications are even more striking. Should India succeed in shaping peace talks, it would signal a historic shift in international politics. The center of gravity in world affairs would no longer rest with Washington or Brussels, but increasingly with Asia. And at the center of that shift would stand Modi, representing a country that is no longer just a regional power, but a rising global player. This moment captures both the decline of American influence and the emergence of India as a nation capable of taking on responsibilities once reserved for the West. Despite the warm gestures at the summit, India's challenges with China remain deeply entrenched. The unresolved border dispute is the most serious of these. Stretching more than 3,400 kilometers, the frontier has been the site of wars, deadly skirmishes, and tense military standoffs. China continues to claim large areas of Indian territory, even going as far as renaming towns and referring to Arunachal Pradesh as South Tibet. Both sides keep building roads, bridges, and military infrastructure, which only raises the risk that another sudden clash could erupt. Talks have eased some of the immediate pressure, but the wounds are fresh, and real trust will be hard to rebuild until the border issue finds a permanent settlement. Pakistan represents the second and equally thorny challenge. Beijing remains Islamabad's closest backer, supplying it with military hardware and providing diplomatic cover at the United Nations. At the SCO summit, the rivalry between India and Pakistan was impossible to disguise. Speeches on regional cooperation and stability rang out across the hall, but the body language of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif told another story. They avoided each other deliberately, steering clear of even a symbolic handshake. That silence carried weight. The SCO presents itself as a platform for unity. Yet the bitterness between India and Pakistan lingers like a shadow over the group's ambitions. Both countries are essential. India with its vast economy and ties to the West, Pakistan with its long-standing partnership with China. But their refusal to move past disputes over Kashmir and cross-border militancy keeps the organization from presenting a fully united front. At a moment when the SCO seeks to project itself as an alternative to Western alliances, these divisions undermine its credibility. For Beijing and Moscow, this deadlock is a source of frustration. For Washington, it is a useful reminder that Asia's unity is still fragile. And for the SCO itself, it underscores a harsh truth. Its strength will only be realized if India and Pakistan can at least lower the temperature of their rivalry. Until then, even at a summit as grand as Tianjin, the fault lines remain visible for all to see. Economic ties add another layer of complexity. India's trade deficit with China now exceeds $100 billion, with Chinese products dominating sensitive sectors from electronics and telecoms to solar power. This dependence presents a dilemma for New Delhi. In seeking to stabilize relations with Beijing, India risks becoming more reliant on its rivals' industries. Whether it can pursue cooperation without sacrificing its own security and self-reliance is the question that now hangs over Modi's strategy. The most recent Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit has become the largest gathering in the group's history. Leaders from across Asia, the Middle East, and even Eastern Europe assembled under one roof, turning what might once have been a routine diplomatic event into a visible show of strength. What stood out this time was the diversity of the participants. Even Turkey, a NATO member, was represented by President Erdogan, signaling Ankara's growing interest in balancing between its Western commitments and closer ties to the East. Central Asian states such as Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan stepped into the spotlight as well, presenting themselves not as peripheral actors, but as essential links in the new Eurasian order now taking shape. Never before has the SCO projected such breadth and determination. The message was unmistakable. This is not just a regional forum anymore, but a platform for building something larger than the system long dominated by Washington. And ironically, one of the forces pushing these nations closer together has been Donald Trump's tariff policies. His sweeping America First agenda, aimed not only at China but also at allies in Europe and beyond, convinced many that the United States can no longer be counted on as a reliable partner. For them, that realization was the final trigger to seek alternatives. Trump has often claimed that his trade wars and tariffs earned the United States more respect. Yet the reality on display in Tianjin was very different. The summit showed that countries are not rallying behind Washington, they are moving away from it. Fear is being replaced by determination. Division is giving way to cooperation. Nations that once looked to the US for leadership are now asking how they can protect their interests and even prosper without American oversight. What we saw in Tianjin may be remembered as the moment the world stopped waiting for Washington and started writing its own rules. If this is the future of global power, then the old order is already slipping away. So if you want to follow how these shifts play out, make sure you're subscribed and we'll track them together.